Hello and welcome to another episode of the Top Dogs podcast here on the Field of 68 Media Network. My name is Rob Doster, and for the second time in 3 games, we have a loss that we need to discuss. UConn dropped the game at home to Creighton 68-63 in Gampel Pavilion in front of a sold-out crowd, in front of a crowd that was loaded up on $2 Miller Lights. It was a game that I don't think was all that unexpected based off of some of the past precedents and the way that UConn and Creighton kind of match up with each other and some of the things that Creighton does specifically that can thwart UConn's offense. We'll get into all that here in a second. I also want to touch on Dan Hurley's comments about his team being soft, and I think Hassan Diarra kind of followed that up a little bit. And there's a little bit that I want to kind of parse through there because I don't think it's entirely fair, but I think there are some things that he said that make a lot of sense and that connect a lot of dots. So we'll kind of get into all that here as well. UConn with the loss is now a game out of first place in the Big East regular season standings. They're tied with Creighton, a game behind Marquette, and I guess a game and a half behind St. John's, who's sitting there at 7-1 in the league. Before we get into any of that, though, I just want to mention the lack of free throws that were given to Hassan Diarra at the end of regulation on the foul it's the worst kind of officiating, right? Like I understand officials are going to miss calls. The over the back against Memphis, the over the back against Colorado, like those things are going to happen, right? Alex Caravan is a guy that's never missed 2 free throws in a row in his life, and he missed 2 free throws at the end of the Villanova game, and those things happen, right? Dan Hurley's going to call plays that don't work. Those things happen, right? You're going to go to your job, and not every single project that you put together is going to be absolutely perfect, right? Nobody is perfect. Everybody makes mistakes no matter what the walk of life is. I get all that. I just hate the reason why DR wasn't given those 3 free throws, because it's kind of been this accepted norm where if you are intentionally fouling somebody at the end of the game, it doesn't matter if they try to get the shot off. It's just accepted that you are going to give them that foul. They have this number of fouls to get through, and it's going to happen. You're going to let it happen, even if it's very clear that Diarra is getting into a 3-point motion, right? One of the ways that you can kind of combat that intentional fouling strategy is to time it so that as they are fouling you, you are shooting so you can get free throws. It is strategy. It is part of the game. It is the same thing as, if you're a smaller defender guarding a bigger player in the post, timing your flop as they hit you to draw that foul call, right? It's part of the game. It's part of the gamesmanship. It's the way that you can combat something at the end of regulation to help yourself win. And Diarra did it. He drew a shooting foul. He was fouled while he was shooting a 3. And it wasn't even like he was firing it up from 75 feet, right? Like he was within the range of where he would actually take a 3. Stephen Ashworth made a 3 from that spot earlier in the game, and he was not rewarded for it. It's a joke. And it just, if we're going to, Kevin Sweeney made this point on After Dark the other night, like if we're going to start doing this, and let's just award the fouls. Like if you want to give an intentional foul, you can take 3 seconds off the game clock doing it or something like that, right? It's like when you're playing baseball and you want to walk somebody, instead of throwing the extra pitches, you just give them first base. If that's what we're going to do, that's where it needs to come down to. But if you get fouled intentionally in the shooting motion, you should be on the 3-point line or the free throw line. It is plain and simple. The officials fucked that up. And I think you can make the argument now. That's the 3rd time where a mistake by an officiating crew has cost UConn a critical call in one of the most important possessions of a game. I also want to make clear that call is not why UConn lost. They were down by 3 at home in front of a sold-out crowd as the ranked team and the 7.5-point favorite, right? They lost that game because of the matchup. They lost that game because of their execution offensively. They lost that game because of defensive issues that they had. They lost that game because Jemiah Neal went absolutely bonkers, right? It's the same reason they lost to Memphis. It's the same reason they blew a lead to Colorado, right? There were 7 seconds left in this game and potentially an OT left to play. Diarra still had to make those 3 free throws. They still had to find a way to be able to get a stop on Creighton's last possession. They still had to find a way, if those three free throws went in and they got a stop on the last possession, to be able to win the extra 5 minutes in overtime, when it seemed like Creighton, for the most part, was probably the better team on this day. So It's not like UConn went from a guaranteed win to a guaranteed loss, but for the most part, those officials took the opportunity for UConn to get to the free throw line and force overtime away from them. So I want to make that clear. I think that it's important to kind of mention all that and talk through all that. The game was not stolen from UConn, but that was a horrific foul call, and Hassan Diarra absolutely should have been shooting for 3 free throws. I do think that it is important to say as well that arguing about wins and losses and how UConn has lost in these specific situations kind of buries the lead for what's most important with this team right now. It's that UConn has some very real flaws, and I don't know how fixable they are at this point in the season, right? If you listen to Hurley and to Sandiar after the game, what they'll tell you is it's as simple as UConn being, quote, soft. And I kind of want to talk through that a little bit, right? Let's start with the defensive side of the ball. Creighton is creative. Creighton is one of the best X's and O's teams in college basketball. They run really, really, really good stuff, like really good, modern, creative stuff that I would hope that Luke Murray has been watching, because there's a lot of stuff that he can kind of poach from them that I think would be really effective with the way that UConn wants to play. I think on Saturday, the biggest strength that he had was creating ways to be able to lift the defense, because they kind of knew that if they did that and they just threw a ball up close to the rim, Kalkbrenner was going to find a way to be able to go and get it. I think they got like 3 or 4 lobs that way. There were a couple of plays where they did the same thing, but you got a back door. One of them was a dunk to the Jemiah Neal. In the past, they've been really, really effective at creating like the quick hitting actions to get an open three for like a Baylor Shireman or a Mitchell Ballack or an Ethel Raggi and kind of guys like that. Creighton executes so well offensively, even without Pop Isaacs. It's just, they're really, really impressive and a really, really good offensive unit. And you can't make things easy on them. And I would argue that that's what UConn did far too often. And here's the example that I'll give you, right? I think Jemiah Neal is a good player. We've seen him pop off for some big games before. He's clearly got size. He's clearly athletic. He's clearly a guy that can make some tough shots. When he gets hot, we can reel off a bunch of buckets in a row. But for the most part, like, you kind of know what he's going to do. It's not like he's out here reinventing the wheel. It's not like he's doing anything different on different possessions, right? Like, he wants to get to his right hand. He wants to drive to the basket. He wants to pull up if he's not going to get there. And it's something where if you were able to execute a scouting report really, really effectively, you can kind of take that stuff away, right? He's a guy where in the past, I do think that UConn would have been able to limit him better than they did tonight. And good defensive teams are able to do that. And I would argue that that is a little bit of a microcosm of what has really impacted UConn more than anything else this season, right? I don't think it's necessarily a lack of effort. I do think that there's a point where it might be a little bit of a lack of toughness, but I think as much as anything, it's just simply what happens when you don't have the pieces that are as good defensively as Steph Castle and Donovan Clingan and Andre Jackson. And I would even make the argument you could throw Tinu and Cam in that conversation as well, right? To be frank, and at the risk of having the staff even more pissed off at me, like, I tend to lean towards the former, right? It's more of a toughness and a physicality thing and a want to thing on that end of the floor. Sampson is just, he's not big enough and he's not physical enough defensively in the paint to be able to do what UConn needs him to do. And I don't think that that's a criticism on the human being. That just, he kind of is a skinny, slender, athletic, quick twitch guy. We've seen Alex get torched defensively in the past and this season. Providence went at him over and over and over and over and over again. I thought Jalen Stewart was really impressive in the way that he guarded Eric Dixon. They also double teamed Eric Dixon. They also did a lot of switching on Eric Dixon. And I thought that Stewie was as much to blame for Jemiah Neal going nuts on Saturday as anybody, right? And as much, also, let's put this into context as well. As much as we raved about how that was one of the best defensive performances of the year for UConn against Villanova, they still gave up 1.12 points per possession. Let's put that into context, okay? They entered that game ranked 131st in defensive efficiency on KenPom. The next morning, they were 128th in defensive efficiency on KenPom. Let's put that into context. On Sunday, when UConn didn't even play, they went from 125th in defensive efficiency to 128th in defensive efficiency, right? Like the margins are so slim and so thin in that part of the rankings that moving like 3, 4, 5, 6 spots can just be something that happens when like you get a rounding error or a decimal moves a certain place, right? So I don't think that there's too much you could take out of it beyond the fact that UConn was not actually really good defensively against Villanova. Now, getting McNeely back will help with some of that. Okay. He's a decent enough positional defender. He will move Jalen Stewart down one spot in the rotation, and he'll move Aiden Mahaney down one spot in the rotation. So you tend to have more good defenders on the floor for more minutes of the game. I think his effort is there. I think he's one of UConn's better defensive rebounders, so he can help end possessions. And frankly, he's their most important piece offensively, I think. So there will be fewer chances for opponents to be able to get out and transition. You know, it's a lot harder to get easy baskets quickly when you are taking the ball through the net and out of bounds than it is when you're grabbing a rebound that bounces out to the foul line and hitting somebody sprinting up the floor for a 2-on-1 break. And with the way that UConn goes after the offensive glass, you can kind of expose some of the stuff that they do in transition. So all of that will help with McNeely back, but it's not going to change the fact that, you know, this team, I don't think takes enough pride in the defensive effort the way that the last 2 years against UConn last season, it was an affront to their masculinity, right? They took that shit personally. They scored them and it was like, no. This ain't happening again. Like, you're not beating me here. Whereas I feel like this team does not kind of view that end of the floor in the same way. And I don't think it's criticism on them as players. It's just something where there's a certain mentality that you have where even the slightest mistake is completely unacceptable. And that's what last year's team had. This year's team just doesn't have that. I do think that there are some issues offensively as well, but I'm more sympathetic to them than anything else, right? And I also think, I want to rewind real quick because I do want to mention this. I'm going to call out Solo Ball again here. I think he has the physical tools to be a terrific on-ball defender. We see the athleticism, you see the length that he has from a wingspan perspective. The kid is tough because he fights through screens, right? It's not like it's not something where he just can't handle the contact or the physicality. I think he can. He's maybe the best shooter in the Big East. Like he's a terrific player offensively. He's as lethal as Jordan Hawkins was running off of screens, but there are times where he gives up as many points as he scores. And look, I know he's not the same size as Steph Castle. Steph Castle was what, 6'5" and 220 pounds, and Solo Ball's like 6'1", 185. But there's still a level of fight that you can provide and you can avoid giving up. Like he was as much to blame for Jemiah Neal going nuts as anybody. There's one very specific play that I remember in the first half where it was before Neal kind of really, really got going, where he got the ball in the perimeter. He was about 28 feet away from the basket, and it wasn't even like there was much of a crossover. He just kind of had the ball, faked one way a little bit. Solo jumped after that fake, gave up the right hand, and Jemiah Neal straight line drive to the rim and dunked it. Like it's something like that where you just cannot have those things happen if you are going to be a team that is competing for championships in college basketball in 2025. And they do over and over and over and over and over again to UConn. I do think that there are issues offensively that I'm more sympathetic to. And I think Liam getting him back is going to be something of a game changer for this program and for this team on the offensive end of the floor. So I don't want to rehash all of that because we've done that plenty of times, but I do think that the combination of his absence, Aiden Mahaney's ineffectiveness, and some of the real questions that we need to have about Jaden Ross at this point put so much pressure on Diarra to do things offensively. And he is to a point living up to him, but it's also a lot to put on a guy that is not, he's not Dylan Harper, right? Like he's not someone that's going to go out and be a top 10 pick in the NBA draft. So they're asking someone to do a lot. And frankly, he's been living up to it, man. I think he's been playing at an all Big East level this season. In the last month since UConn got back from Maui and has kind of gone on this run, I would make the argument that Hassan Diarra is kind of in the All America kind of range in terms of the performances that he's had. He's been as good as anybody at the point guard position in this league, this side of Cam Jones. That's the truth. I've written off Jaden Ross as a guy that can really impact offensively this season. Maybe one day the potential is there. You see the athleticism. He can make some shots. He's made a couple more recently than he did at the start of the season. But right now, he's not a guy that's going to really provide a spark offensively off the bench. Mahaney's not going to be that guy. Like they really, really need Aiden Mahaney to be someone that could make a difference on Saturday, the way they made a difference against Providence. And he was 2 for 8 from the floor. Just wasn't good enough. Even Alex, man, even Alex Karaban, like at his best, I understand it. I don't want to rehash all this. We talked about it after Villanova. At his best, he is a complementary piece. But there are going to be times where he cannot just be a complementary piece this season. And I know he's dealing with the ankle thing, right? And I know that it's not what he is built to do or how he necessarily wants to play. But if you're going to be the All-American NBA draft pick on this team, like you got to be able to step up and take some games over when Liam McNeely's not on the floor, right? I think Dan said it best. Like they wanted him to take 16 or 17 shots in that game on Saturday, and he finished 3 for 12. I'm sympathetic to the role that he is being asked to play and how it's out of his comfort zone. And I also totally understand why the inability to get out of his comfort zone might be something that frustrates Hurley and frustrates the fan base and frustrates the people that want to see Karaban kind of take the game by the scruff of the neck and go into takeover mode. Like I want to see at some point one of these games where he just pops off for 30 because I know that it's in there. I know he can do it. I know he's capable of doing it. And, it's I don't know if it's a confidence thing. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know if it's a self-belief thing, but there's some times where I just want to like sit him down and play the highlights of like him going for 27 in a game last year, or like some of the dunks that he's had, or him like reeling off 3 straight threes in the step backs and knocking down 30 footers and like, look, dude, you're a badass. Look at this. This is what you can do. Now go out there and do it on every possession and go carry us to some W's, you know? I think that's where I don't know if frustration is even the right word here, but I think that's kind of where all of that stems from, is that a lot of people out here know and believe that he is a guy that can be an All-American caliber or star. And right now, what he's kind of resigning himself to being is an All-American role player. And I think that those are very different things. And I would like to see the former pop out here a couple of different times. Great opportunity to be with Tuesday against Butler. He was awesome at Butler. UConn needed him to be awesome at Butler. Butler finally snapped a 9-game losing streak, so they got a bunch of wings. It's a great opportunity for Alex Karaban to showcase who he is and what he can be, and kind of go take a game over. So I'd love to see it happen. Let's get to this game specifically and kind of what actually happened here. I talked about it in the past. The way that Creighton plays, the scheme is just really effective at counteracting what UConn wants to do offensively. And it's pretty simple, right? Like they top lock, or they really trail hard, all of the pin downs. Everything that they do defensively is designed to force UConn to, when they're running their offense and coming off of those screens, to funnel everything into the middle of the lane, into the middle of the paint. Like they're not going to let you get any flare screens. They're not going to let you come off of a pin down and kind of curl into a catch and shoot open three. They're going to trail all of that. They're going to go over the top of all of that. They're going to sit on your back hip, and they're going to say that the option that we'll give you is go and take something going towards the basket. And the reason that works is because UConn doesn't have a floor spacing 5. Samson Johnson and Terrence Reed are guys that are good. You don't have to guard them outside of like 8 feet, right? And so they plop Ryan Kalkbrenner right there at the charge circle. And they kind of say, look, what you're going to do is we're going to force you to drive to the basket. And if you want to try to finish over that 7'2", three-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year, have at it. Good luck. Enjoy it. We want to see you try. And what that ends up meaning is that you're kind of forced into a situation where you're taking those little mid-range floaters and those little midi jumpers and those little 12-foot pull-ups and the shots that are certainly makeable, but in this day and age of college basketball, the ones that we know are the most inefficient shots in terms of expected points that you can get. That's why I think that they needed more from Aiden. That's kind of where Aiden lives, right? His game is kind of getting to the Big East logo in the paint and then finding a way to score from there, whether it's go and create an angle and finish at the rim, take a little pull-up jumper and knock one down over the center. And I just did not think that Aiden was good enough. And frankly, like with Liam McNeely on the floor, like that's kind of where Liam thrives, right? What he was so good at in the weeks before he got hurt was coming off of those curls, getting into those 2-on-1 situations with the big man and making the right play, whether it was scoring himself, whether it was throwing a lob to the five, whether it was waiting for help to come from the guy in the corner and kicking it out for an open three. He's at his best making those decisions in those moments. And he's also bigger. So let's be honest. Aiden Mahaney's what, 6'1", maybe 6'2". Liam McNeely's 6'7". It's a lot easier as a 6'7" player to finish over 7'2" Ryan Kalkbrenner than it is as a 6'1" player to do the same thing. So I think Liam would be a really big impact the next time that these two teams face. But it kind of is what it is. Creighton's just a tough matchup. UConn got 20 piece there. Like if they're when Creighton plays the defense that they want to play, UConn misses some of the open threes that they get. McNeely doesn't finish in and around the paint, and you let Jemiah McNeil go nuts, and you don't get some of the offensive rebounds that you should be getting. You're going to take a loss at home. It just is what it is. So it's a tough matchup. Creighton played better than UConn did. And these are the things that happens in tough matchups when the other team plays better than you. So I said earlier this year, though, that the growth of the young guys is going to be something that is really fun to watch in this team. And I'm going to give a ton of credit to Solo and Stewie. Both of them have big steps that they have to make on the defensive end of the floor. And I think that they'll get there. And my guess is that I think both of them have NBA potential. And my guess is that it'll probably be another year in college before they can really realize that. And I fully expect them to, maybe it's a little bit of a longer process here, and maybe the impact of having more older players in the sport is why it's taking a little bit longer for these guys to develop. But I think Solo and Stewie are both going to end up being very good next year. And I'm really excited about what they can be as they figure things out defensively. You know, I touched on it a little bit with Solo, and I think it kind of tracks with Stewie too, where the reason why they aren't great defensively, this is why I push back a little bit on the idea of like a lack of toughness. I don't know if it's toughness or as much as they haven't quite figured out what it takes to defend at this level, because functionally they are kind of still freshmen. Like this is the first year they're really playing major minutes like this. And I think that they'll get there. Again, I think some of it is reps. I think some of it is learning how to be able to stay dedicated to the scouting report. I think some of it is a mental thing where you can't let up on any single possession or you're going to get beat when it comes to the dog days of Big East play. So I don't think it's totally out of the question they can really come into their own if they get another season. Terrace has had moments. It's been fun to watch him develop. We're still waiting on Aiden and Jaden. I think I don't know how long we're gonna have to wait there, but honestly, I think Amon Noel might be the next man up now. Like he had some moments against Georgetown. He's starting to work his way into the rotation a little bit. I think he's kind of primed to take over as the heir apparent to point guard with Asandiar out. And I do think all those guys are going to be back for another year before they leave UConn. So they do give. Let's put it like this. I really hope that they find a way to be able to send off Samson, Hassan, and AK in the way that those three deserve for what they have done for UConn the last 3 years. So Butler on Tuesday. Hopefully this is a chance to kind of turn it around. Hopefully it's a chance to kind of get into get right mode Going to Xavier on Saturday, the 25th, is going to be a brutal, brutal game. Xavier will have to get that. The Cintas Center is going to be sold out. They looked like they really kind of figured some things out, especially defensively against Marquette. Their guards are as talented as any set of guards in the country. They put up 89 in the Civic or in the Civic Center, the XL Center earlier this season. So it's going to be tough, man. And one last note, real quick, before we kind of get to Saturday's segment on from After Dark that I'm going to drop in here for you guys. I thought it was UConn took the loss, but I thought it was a huge, massive weekend for the Big East as a whole. Creighton getting a road win against one of the top teams in the league. Xavier getting a road win against one of the top teams in the league. You're looking at a situation now where there are still 5 teams that have very, very real chance to get themselves a bid to the NCAA tournament. And you're going to have to get some breaks. And you're going to have to get some bounces that go your way down the stretch of the season here. But Creighton and Xavier lived up to who we thought they would be in the preseason on Saturday. And I personally am hoping that we see that the rest of the season. I want to see 5 teams from the Big East get in. It sucks just seeing 3 of those teams get in. So here's the hope, and Xavier and Creighton are going to find a way to keep this thing going, get it to be a 5-bid league, get more units, get more money coming in for the conference, and that's a good thing overall. When you have 11 teams in the league and you get 5 in, it's not all that dissimilar from a conference like, let's just say, the Big Ten getting 8 or 9 teams in the tournament. It sounds better because there are more numbers, but 5 out of 11 is not a terrible thing when it's all said and done. So sucks that UConn was the one that had to take the loss for Creighton to be able to get in that spot. Would have helped that it was would have been nice if it was St. John's that did it at home, but it is what it is, and we are where we are. So let's head to that conversation. It was John Fanta, Jeff Goodman, and myself breaking down the UConn and Creighton game on Saturday night on After Dark. If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 throughout the year. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use bonus code FIELD, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. The best part, all you need to do is deposit and bet $10 of your own hard-earned money to be eligible. Here's how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using that bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. BetMGM is going to have some fun offers available throughout the NBA playoffs. Bet insurance tokens, odds boost, and what I love, a nice parlay boost or two from time to time, as well as a ridiculous array of player prop bets for any sport that you could possibly imagine betting on. BetMGM is and always will be the king of the prop bet. So go download the BetMGM app, use the bonus code FIELD, and sign up today. And while I've got you, a quick request. The best way to support the Field of 68 content that you get for free is to engage with us. Rate and review the podcast. Like and share the YouTube videos. Tell your friends about us. It all helps in a world where the algorithm is king. And now, back to the show. Now that the college basketball season is in full swing, you need to make sure that you have access to the best betting tool on the market, the Rhythm app. Spelled RITHMM, is a data-backed app that uses AI and analytics to identify inefficiencies in betting lines and the player prop market that will allow you, the user, to profit. You can create customized, analytics-driven betting models tailored to your personal preferences as a bettor. Users have access to up-to-the-second against-the-spread data. And if you're like me and you understand pictures better than numbers on a screen, Rhythm's internal trend analysis provides you with the kind of graphs that will allow you to evaluate past results and project future performance in a visual way. Every Division I college basketball team is included in the Rhythm's metrics. Free subscribers to the Field of 68 Daily will get 25% off for a Rhythm subscription. Use the QR code on the screen to sign up or download at the link in the description.
Let's transition and let's get the train on the tracks here. Let's go to the Big East, where if you opened up the standings in that conference at this very moment, you would see Rick Pitino and St. John's at 7-1 in this league in first place all by themselves. They're having their best season as a program since 1985-86. They've won 11 of 12. They'll be ranked on Monday. But the big story in this league is that 4 out of 5 road teams won this weekend. The two biggest are two teams that we've talked about having those San Antonio aspirations. So let's start in Stores, where UConn is hosting Creighton. Greg McDermott against Dan Hurley in UConn. Creighton games. Greg McDermott 7-2 all time against Dan Hurley, make it 8-2. Creighton 68, UConn 63. The Blue Jays get led by Jemiah Neal, and Connecticut still without Liam McNeely. Their 28-game home winning streak ends. Creighton, a massive move the needle win. They're now more than just on the bubble. They just may have. This could be a Saturday we look back on as one that they punched their ticket to the NCAA tournament with a win over Kansas as well. But Jeff, Connecticut falls at home. 28-game home winning streak snapped. Your reaction?
I heard Dan Hurley afterwards talking about it and saying, defense hasn't been great. They're not tough enough. They don't play with that same intensity that the last two teams have played with. I think that's all true. I also just don't think they're nearly as talented. And they don't have a guy named Donovan Clingan to erase things and even, throw the ball up and he'll go get it on the offensive end. But, listen, they don't have a star. They don't have a star. Alex Carabin was hurt today. Even when he's healthy, he's not a guy that you just give the ball to and say, hey, go make a play. Solo ball can do that at times. Jalen Stewart's been very inconsistent this season. Again, I think Diarra has done an incredible job, way better than I thought as a point guard this year. And they miss McNeely. Let's face it. Like Liam McNeely takes him to a different level because he's the guy who just kind of does everything well, right? He does everything well. But even with a healthy Liam McNeely, I will say this. I still don't think they're a Final Four team. I think they're just a notch above, and I think they probably win this game with a healthy Liam McNeely. They're a good team. They're not what they've been the last 2 years, and that's fine. That's fine. We just have to kind of embrace that they weren't as bad as they were in Maui, and they probably weren't as good as they were the month coming out of Maui. They're somewhere in between, and they could still win this league if they get McNeely back soon.
Yeah, I would push back on you saying that they don't have a star. They do have a star. He just happens to be sitting out right now with an ankle injury. I thought that Liam McNeely was in the stretch where they kind of figured things out, right? Coming out of Maui, and that stretch, the Baylor, Texas, Gonzaga, Xavier Butler, like that little run there, he was their best player. He was the guy that was putting up 20 points. He was the guy that was averaging like 5 or 6 assists in that run. He was their secondary playmaker. Like he was the guy. He was on the verge of putting himself in like that like one of the best freshmen in the country conversation, right? And not having him is a major blow because it puts everything on Hassan Diarra for creating offensively. And it means that Alex Carabin is put into a role where he's asking to be an initiator and someone instead of someone that is a floor spacer and a role player. And it means that Jalen Stewart or Jaden Ross is playing 30 to 33 minutes as a starter instead of being your spot 15 to 20 minute game a guy off the bench. And it moves everybody up into a different spot. And those guys aren't perfect fits for that spot. And they were still 2 Alex Carabin free throws away from beating Villanova at Villanova. And they were still a brutal non-call on a Hassan Diarra 3 with the foul. He should have been shooting three free throws away from having a chance to tie Creighton at home despite that being down by 9. I'll also say this. Creighton is about as bad of a matchup stylistically with Ryan Kalkbrenner as you're going to find for UConn, because what Creighton does as well as anybody is they top lock and they chase over screens. And what they do is essentially, no matter what the screen is, off ball, on ball, they funnel you to Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's playing a deep drop. Since UConn doesn't have a 5-man that can be a floor spacer, he doesn't even leave the paint. Like he's standing at the charge circle the entire game. And they're basically saying with their wings and their perimeter players, we are not letting you run off of screens and shoot threes. We are not letting you get these 3-point shots off. We're going to funnel you to the paint where you're going to have to take tough twos. You're going to have to take mid-range jumpers. We're going to make you take these little 12-foot floaters. And they made some of them, but for the most part, they were funneling UConn into Cal, who is the best defensive 5 that you're going to find in college basketball right now. So part of it is just the way that those two teams stylistically match up with Kalkbrenner at the 5 is pretty much a nightmare for what UConn wants to do offensively. We saw it last year in Omaha. And then when you have a night where you're doing that defensively and Jemiah McNeil is throwing, everything is going in that he's throwing up, right? You have Stephen Ashworth knocking home 33-foot threes multiple times in a game. Like, that's just kind of one of those ones where you just kind of shake your head and say, okay, you know what? We're going to have to take this one on the chin. And all of the criticism that you said in terms of not having a star, like all of that stuff, you're 100% correct on. I don't think that they are good enough defensively to make a run back to the Final Four. It's a lot of the same stuff we talked about with Kentucky, but there's also a lot of mitigating circumstances here. And I'm just going to play devil's advocate. If they make the right over the back call against Memphis, they make the right over the back call against Colorado, they make the right call against. They make the right call on the 3-point against the Sandiara.
And Alex about today's game.
There's a real chance that UConn could have one loss in the season right now.
It's
the officials.
Why do we allow? Cut them off.
There is a conspiracy.
Time's up. Your time is up. Let me set the record straight on this. Here's the deal. When you go 37-3 last year and you've won the last 2 national championships, the standards all change. They get extraordinary. The standards are through the roof of like, you're surprised when they lose. You're surprised when they lose, but you shouldn't be surprised because every team is its own entity. Here's my take on this team. Liam McNeely's the best freshman in the Big East. He is. Thomas Sorber's had a nice year. McNeely he does everything. He's smart. He's beyond his years. Obviously, he's a significant loss. But without him, Alex Karaban can't go 3 for 12 from the floor. Because Aiden Mahaney's not a factor. He wasn't today. He shot 2 of 8 in the game. And without McNeely, Jaden Ross has to give this team something. Or Mahaney off the bench. Outside of Terrace Reed, who played 16 minutes in this game and did not have a particularly good performance himself, they don't have enough. Some of their players that they thought they'd get more from, they're not getting more from. Not on an every game basis. So with that in mind, Karaban's got to be great. Today he wasn't. If McNeely plays in this game, Connecticut wins this ball game. He didn't play. It took a Jemiah Neal career day. Why? Because this was Creighton's Super Bowl. If Creighton loses this game, they've lost at UConn. They've lost at Marquette. If you don't win either of those road games and you're bubbly, it's going to be hard to make it. Now, Creighton's got what others in the Big East don't have. They have the best strength of schedule in the league, and they beat Kansas. But you could tell from the moment the game tipped off, Greg McDermott was locked in. He knew he had to shoot his load in this game, that his team had to empty the bucket and win this game. And they did. Give credit to Creighton. They went in there and found a way to win. And you could say that UConn was shorthanded, and UConn, the Connecticut Huskies are a top 15 to 20 team in college basketball. They are not a top 5 to 8 team in the sport. After 8 right now, it's a crapshoot. There's nothing wrong with them going to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament and bowing out. When you've won the last 2 national championships, if you win one and lose your second round game, there's nothing wrong with that. They are a really good team. They are not an otherworldly team. We've got to move on because it's 11:33 and we got so much other stuff to get to.